Turning to Rich, IMAX represents 10% of the Chinese box office.
When it's in IMAX.
When it's in IMAX. So what are your plans? What are your? I know you have an association with Jerry, but what are your plans for Tier 1 cities, Tier 2 cities, Tier 3 cities, and Tier 4 cities?
Well, that'll take a few days, Millard, but I'll try and make it briefer than that. First, just a little bit of a historical perspective to follow up on what Ellen and Senator Dodd were saying, which is we started going to China about 15 years ago. And literally there were no Western companies, and Millard didn't even have a gleam in his eye as to what was gonna happen then. And I would literally meet with members of the State Council, which is like the cabinet here in the US, because it was so strange to have Westerners, especially in the entertainment industry out there at that point in time. But we spent years building relationships. And we were talking, we had a lunch before this panel to discuss some of the things we were gonna talk about. And the progress which they've talked about is remarkable. But I use the analogy of like a stock graph over time, which is that although there's progress if you start here and you end up here, there's also a lot of ups and downs. And there's a lot of challenges of doing business in China. And I think Peter did a very good job at identifying most of them, you know, regulatory piracy, etc. But I think you have to go into China with your eyes wide open, and you have to recognize that it's not really a straight line. That would be one of the things that we've learned over the years. That's very clear. The second thing is, and maybe if you come away from this panel with one thing based on our experience, is that it really has to be a win-win situation. And I think a lot of foreign companies, particularly US companies, go into China, you know, sort of the way they went into South America years ago. And they think, well, here's a market for the pickings, and you know, let's go in and let's teach them how to run their business. But our experiences in China is from the beginning, we tried to create win-win scenarios, and we tried to find the right partners, most of whom are sitting up here in different ways, but we tried to figure out ways that not we only made money, but our Chinese partners made money, and the Chinese consumers got what they wanted. And that's been just such an important lesson to us. And Wanda, Jerry here, is our biggest partner in China. We have almost 100 theaters together. And just to give you a sense, IMAX had 13 theaters in 2009. And now we have over 100 open. We have 250 scheduled to open, in a total of 250 in the next couple of years. We do 10 to 20% of the box office on any particular movie we're involved in China. Jerry reminded me at lunch that the average ticket price in IMAX is about $16. Sometimes it's $20 in China. So, I mean, this is a really sophisticated, high-end film market, and you really have to understand that. So our plans, Millard, are to grow it out more than we did. I think, what is that sound? Is that
Next door. Can we get someone to go across and ask them to turn it down? Thank you.
It must be a very good movie. So our experience has been in the top two tiers, 1 and 2, we're getting really high prices. The consumers feel they've gotten value for their money. Part of it is IMAX grew up with the movie-going experience in China. In places like the US, where we came out of more of an institutional background, we had to change people's mindsets. But in China, IMAX became synonymous with blockbuster movies. China is a place that is very brand conscious, especially outside the home. And I think that, thank God for that. What? That's right, it was sound effects going about it. But particularly outside the home, if those of you who follow China, you look at, you know, cars and handbags and restaurants and things like that. Cinema is very similar to that, where the idea to go to a branded experience is very important. And Wanda's been phenomenal at building their brand and building our brand as well. And that's been successful. But again, at lunch we were talking about what about the tier 3 and the tier 4 cities. That's interesting because for companies that have mass cinema, more like Wanda or their competitors, it's a challenge because there's less disposable income. But for someone like IMAX, there's still a small segment that could afford the higher ticket price, and in those third and fourth tier cities, there are less entertainment options. So in IMAX, for example, in the United States, some of our best markets in this country are in Wichita and in Oklahoma City, because I was going to say they don't have a basketball team, but the Thunder would probably be insulted about that. There are less options. But in those places, I think cinema, even though there's less disposable income, creates more of an opportunity for moviegoers, because there's something to do as that disposable income goes along. So anyway, if you keep in mind, make sure it's a win-win situation, and you recognize that there's going to be ups and downs, and you choose the right partner, I think China has a very bright future.
Thanks, Rich.